America, I'm Lyle Rapaki, and this is Arizona Today. I'm really excited about my guest. I say that almost on every guest I have, but this one is really exciting because I got the privilege of meeting him prior to him being in Congress. Eli Crane is my special guest. He is in Washington, and I actually got the privilege of meeting Eli and talking to him on the phone a couple of times before he even announced. And our conversations were pretty long, and he was not at all guarded. He was very straightforward. And I've seen that in his years in Congress. He's not politically correct. He's very straightforward. He's candid. And he's what we used to have as servant leaders. We just don't have them very much anymore. So, Congressman, thank you for taking time out. I know you're in your office. I know you're busy, but thanks for taking time out to join us on Arizona Today.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Lyle.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Eli was born in Arizona. He's an Arizona boy. He went to the U of A. I'll forgive him for that. I'm NAU, lumberjack. But he went to U of A. And then this is interesting. I've discussed it. I've known this for years, but maybe you don't. After September 11th, after the terrorist attack on our country, Congressman Crane, Eli Crane, stopped college and joined the military. And he was in the military, I think, about 15 years or 13, 15 years. And he was a Navy SEAL and was deployed 5 times. He's a member of the Homeland Security Committee and the Freedom Caucus. And I asked the congressman, would you mind coming on, taking time out and giving us here, not only in Arizona, but nationally, a little bit of a view from his perspective from behind the curtain. He's there, we're not. We get to see and hear things on TV, and we kind of question all of that. But here's a real source who's not politically correct, and he's very straightforward. So if you're ready, Congressman, I'd like to just go ahead and barge into this thing.
Let's do it.
Okay. One of the things I'd like to talk about, and I know you've been involved in this, is the border update. What's, in your views, taking place to secure our borders?
Well, Lyle, thanks for asking. Look, the entirety of the Biden administration, many of us said that, it wasn't Congress that needed to step up and act. We just needed a commander in chief with common sense who wanted to secure the border. This goes all the way back to when President Biden was candidate Biden running for office. He made multiple statements while he was campaigning saying, hey, if you want to come here and you feel oppressed, we welcome you. We want you to come. He said several other things, like if you're seeking asylum, we want you to flood to the border. That's who we are. He said all sorts of things, all sorts of quotes like that in that same line of thinking. And so every one of us, that has any common sense knew exactly what was going to happen. He was playing to his radical left-wing base who are globalists. They're open border. They're an open border crowd. They don't want there to be any borders whatsoever. And a lot of globalists don't. And so we knew what was going to happen. I don't know that any of us knew exactly how bad it was going to be, but 4 years later, looking back, we now have estimates are between 12 and 20 million illegals in the country. We've seen the fallout of that. We've seen countless Americans be killed, raped, murdered by individuals who were never supposed to be here in the first place. We saw a dramatic rise in, individuals on the terror watch list trying to get into the country. We saw record numbers of fentanyl deaths. And it's just, completely, not only is it inappropriate, but it's a complete catastrophe that was man-made by us, by our former administration. Lyle, this, the number one job of the federal government outside of protecting our unalienable God-given rights is to protect the American people. And we did the exact opposite of that under the Biden administration. And so you might also recall that last Congress, there was a bipartisan border bill that was led by, Democrats and Republicans. And many folks, came after those of us who opposed this bill. Our argument was that this bill would codify the invasion of our country. We said that there doesn't even need to be a bill. You just need to have a commander in chief that actually uses his authorities and uses existing law, holds, these individuals that are coming in illegally to our existing laws. And it'll take, we'll have this border secured almost instantaneously. And that's what you saw with President Trump. You had a guy that, one thing people love about him is he keeps his promises. And within, a matter of weeks, President Trump had the border largely secured. I mean, we've got border crossings now down 95%. He had, I think it was close to 30 cartel bosses flown in, through extradition so that they can face trial here in the United States of America. He forced Mexico with tariffs to send, close to 10,000 soldiers to the border like he had in his first term to help us secure that border. And now he's got he's declared it a national emergency. He's got National Guardsmen down on the border. He's even using our military to deport individuals like some of these, very dangerous Tren de Agua gang members, MS-13 gang members, and others outside the country. And so, I mean, once again, it just shows the American people that not only is President Trump a man who keeps his word, but that Joe Biden and a lot of politicians up here were completely gaslighting the American people, saying that they didn't have any authorities, any abilities to do it. And once again, they were proven wrong.
As a member of Congress, and this may be a touchy question, I don't mean it to trick you. Do members of Congress today, more than even 60 days ago, let's say since January, are members of Congress now more aware of just how dangerous this has been and how we've come close to losing our national sovereignty?
No, Lyle, I don't think that there was any question, even 60 days ago, even a year ago, how dangerous this situation is or was. I think it's just the big, catalyst here is the election of President Trump. Everybody, we harped on this nonstop for the entirety of, Joe Biden's term. I was a freshman last Congress. This is my third year up here. But I know that, the Republicans, at a minimum, were doing everything. I shouldn't say everything, but they were definitely making a loud noise about it, and trying to point out the hypocrisy, but also, how dangerous this situation was. Because even your most moderate, Republican has individuals in their district that, they represent getting killed by individuals who weren't supposed to be here. Many of their constituents dying from fentanyl. So it's something that we've known for a very long time. And like I said, Kyle or Lyle, going back to even when Joe Biden was running, many of us knew that this was going to turn into a full-blown catastrophe, 5 years ago.
Now, you were successful to pass the Subterranean Border Terrorism, I may have it wrong, Act. Can you explain to all of us what that is?
Yeah, well, obviously, Lyle, whether we're talking about last Congress or even after the president came into office and has basically secured our border, we have to all understand that these cartels aren't just going to sit by and say, oh, well, we're going to go ahead and, pack up and go home now that President Trump is in office. They won't stop. They make too much money, selling drugs into the country, human trafficking into the country. And so if they can't, go through the ports of entry, if they can't, use their coyotes to smuggle in drugs and human traffickers in between the ports of entry, they'll use drones to go over that port of entry, or they'll use the tunnel systems that we know about to go subterranean underneath the surface and get them in that way. And one of the dangers we know of 140 tunnels, Lyle, that have been built, and those are just the ones that we know of. But if you think about how dangerous the tunnels are, Lyle, the cartels normally use those tunnels to import drugs into the country because of the return on investment that they get. But if a terrorist organization pays the right price, Lyle, those tunnels can be used to transport weapons of mass destruction or even terrorist cells themselves into the country, and they have a much less chance of being apprehended or arrested. And so the Subterranean Border Defense Act, what it really does is it forces Border Patrol to report to Congress annually on the threats that they're seeing when it comes to subterranean borders, or I'm sorry, subterranean tunnels that are being built underground. And it also forces them to report what they're doing, to try and mitigate and stop those threats. And so oftentimes up here, Lyle, because of the mass waves of, illegal immigration that we've seen on the surface, our Border Patrol agents use their assets and they get tied up, stopping that wave of individuals so they don't have the manpower and resources often to, deal with some of the other threats like the tunnel threat. And so if we're unable to, understand what assets, what resources we need to throw at that problem, unless we get the proper reporting from, Border Patrol. And that's really what this bill will do. It passed last Congress in the House. It's passed this Congress in the House. And we're hopeful that now that we control the Senate, we'll be able to pass it into law and have a much better situational awareness on, what Border Patrol is doing to handle that threat.
I'm fully aware that you may not be able to discuss in specificity some of this, what I'm about to ask or share, based on classification. But as you can speak into this, please. It was my privilege in 2010 to begin to advise members of the Arizona legislature and also members of the Texas legislature on border security. And one of the things that I presented in restricted intel was the tunnels. They were sort of brand new. They've been around longer, but we became more aware of them. At least I did around 2010, 2009. And some of these tunnels are very sophisticated. They have lighting, they have railroad tracks. I'm not going to say air conditioning, but they have air flow going through there where they can move almost like trains. Now, not exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, don't mislead. I don't want to mislead you saying a big train, but very specific types of rail movement where they can move, like the congressman's saying, people, ammunition, drugs, whatever. And these tunnels were very sophisticated and quite long. They weren't just like 100 yards. They were quite long. Is there anything you could speak into, given the security issues related to that?
Well, what I can say, Lyle, is it is a very real threat. And like I said, when we know of 140 of them, we also know that we don't know about all of them. I can also tell you that, when you look around the world at geopolitics, you look, for instance, at Gaza, right? And, how the, Palestinians have basically built cities underground. Good point. Using, tunneling, the technology that you use to build tunnels to basically build cities underground. That's a very real possibility because you have to understand, the type of money that you're talking about with the cartels. They almost have unlimited resources. So like I said, if they can't go, if they can't, bring folks in above ground, they won't stop trying to get their product into the U.S. There's just too much money involved. And so that's why these things are so important. We do have technologies that help us, find these tunnels. We do have, ways of dealing with these tunnels once they're found. But, the bottom line is Congress can't allocate the resources to the Border Patrol. That's one of our big jobs up here with the power of the purse is to allocate, appropriate, resources to the Border Patrol, Department of Defense, Department of, Justice, et cetera, if we don't know the threat that we're facing. And that's really what this bill is about. And to make sure that we're not turning a blind eye to a pretty big threat that could be used, to really harm America, our communities, and our cities.
Switching gears for a moment, your colleague, Congressman Andy Biggs, who was on my show a week or so ago and is announced for governor of Arizona, which I'm sad, but I'm happy. I mean, I'm sad because he's leaving the Freedom Caucus in Congress and we need him there, but I'm happy because we need him here in Arizona as governor, because Arizona's in some trouble, in my opinion. He introduced a resolution, Article 3, under the Constitution, Article 3, Section 1, to remove federal judges for failing to uphold good behavior, and that's in quotes. The judicial overreach, judicial activism, political bias, weaponizing of the courts, all of these things would fall into a judge that is not adhering to strict rules of law and the interpretation of the Constitution for the good of our nation. They're actively involved in biased politics, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any insight on that resolution? And has there really been discussion? Two parts here. Any insight on that resolution? And the second part, has there really been a discussion in Congress about these activist judges?
Yeah, there's been a ton of conversation about these activist judges. I did learn a little bit from Congressman Biggs just this week about his efforts on this front. Basically, several of us introduced articles of impeachment. I was the first member of the House to introduce articles of impeachment, I think 6 or 7 weeks ago, against Judge Engelmeyer, one of the judges trying to block Elon Musk and our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent from accessing, payment files that were going out of the Treasury. But Congressman Biggs, and this is one thing I love about him, he's very wise. He's very smart when it comes to the Constitution. And I think he recognized how heavy of a lift it would be to actually impeach these judges, because I think we would need close to, over 15 votes in the Senate. I think it's like 17 votes in the Senate to impeach these judges, whether we get it through the House or not. And so Congressman Biggs, I think, is, crafted this resolution in a way, hoping that we can just fire them and, go around the Senate filibuster. I don't know if House leadership is going to take up Congressman Biggs's resolution or not. I know that they're looking at Darrell Iss's legislation right now. I've been told by Speaker Johnson that we don't even have the votes in the House of Representatives to do the impeachments. I happen to think that even if we were to, begin the process of impeachment, it might back off some of these judges. And I know Darrell Iss's legislation, it would basically stop these nationwide injunctions. There's, I think, about 677 district judges in the country. It would basically stop them from putting down, looking at one particular case, making a ruling, and then that ruling becoming a nationwide, injunction, stopping anybody and everybody. And Lyle, basically what these guys are doing, these activist judges understand that because they don't control the House, the Senate, or the presidency, they're doing everything they can to stop the Trump administration. And so the bottom line is we need to do everything in our power, in my opinion, to try and stop these judges from basically trying to usurp the president of the United States, constitutional Article 2 powers, as the chief executive.
Andy, I've known Andy Biggs for about 12 years. And we discussed it on the show. He's not reactionary. You're correct, Congressman. He's very stable, very calm, very judicial. I mean, he looks at all sides before he moves forward. He's not a reactionary type person. And I was very surprised but delighted to see that he introduced that. And I was also very excited, which was another reason I wanted to see if you had some time, because of your involvement the last 6 weeks or so to hold these activist judges to task. It seems like the judicial system has become a branch of some radical political party, and I've never known it that way in America. And I think our forefathers would be appalled, personally. So thank you for what you're doing. Not if, but when Andy Biggs wins the governorship in Arizona, he's going to lead the Freedom Caucus, which you are a member, and Paul Gosar. You'll stay in the Freedom Caucus, I hope.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan, Lyle. It'll be a shame to see Congressman Biggs go. He's been a
Yeah.
mentor of mine. He's a really good friend of mine. But this is the way things works. And I think if he is to win that race, I think he'd be a phenomenal governor. So.
I absolutely agree. Um, I'm going to push you if it's okay, Congressman. I know that may cause me to have a hearing or something, but it's not every day, ladies and gentlemen, you get to push a congressman. It just doesn't happen that way. But let me push you for a quick answer, and then hopefully, prayerfully, you'll come back in a few weeks and we can expand on it. Because I have really two things I'd like to ask you. One, very quickly, Ukraine. Can you just give us a Ukraine update? And then secondly, I'd like you to explain the work that you're doing on rural veterans and giving them some respite here.
Yeah, so I think the Russia-Ukraine issue has been at the forefront of national and global politics for many years now.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been pretty outspoken about in trying to not only awaken the populace, and the citizens of the United States to what this could turn into really quickly, but also to caution our leaders to try and prevent us from getting into another never-ending war with the largest nuclear superpower in the world. And unfortunately, Lyle, there's far too many politicians up here that, just look at that. I think from a pretty arrogant perspective. Many of them have never gone to war. Many of them, have never, had to bury friends. Many of them have never had to sit there and console a Gold Star wife or a Gold Star mother. And, this is something that has been, near and dear for many years now, and trying to prevent another world war from kicking off, and also to try and really point us towards what I think we should have been pointed towards since this thing kicked off, and that's initiating peace talks. And that's something that President Trump wisely has started to do from the moment that the American people spoke in very large historic numbers to bring him back into office, that, peace talks was the direction that we needed to head. Obviously, it's a very complicated situation. And, it was very interesting that the American people got to see, the meeting in the Oval Office with Zelensky, several weeks ago, and just how that whole thing went down. And I think we got to see, how President Trump conducts himself, how he does business, how, he ushers in peace through strength, and how he basically, showed Zelensky that, hey, I don't really care how the last administration, dealt with you in this situation, but this is a new administration, and we're not going to give you peace guarantees. We have no appetite to continue sending blood and treasure to another, never-ending war. And what the direction that this is going to head from here on out is we're going to be working towards peace talks. And so, I know the president, has a Herculean effort in front of him as he tries to, unravel this entire thing. But there's nobody that I would rather have negotiating this peace talk, because one thing that President Trump has shown us in his last administration is that he is a man who, prefers peace to war. And but he's very capable of doing the latter. And I think that's one of the reasons that many world leaders take him very seriously. And I think it's one of the many reasons that during his first term, you never saw Vladimir Putin making any strategic moves like he did under Bush, Obama, and Biden. And so it's obviously headed in a new direction. I know we got some news just within the last several hours that there has been a ceasefire between the Ukrainians and the Russians in regards to the Black Sea. And so I think that that's a definitely a good first step. And I hope to see that trajectory continued so that we can bring this thing to an end, and see an ending to the loss of, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, and, destruction of, cities that are filled with innocent civilians.
Finally, you have been a friend. Well, you're a colleague, a veteran, but you've been a friend to veterans, making sure that they are taken care of. I may not be using the right words, Congressman, but they're taken care of after their active service, after their duty. And you're involved now with passing a rural retreat center. Do I have that right for veterans?
Yeah, so we've continued our efforts to get the Young Veteran Retreat Center open. And basically what this is, Lyle, this is a land exchange between the Forest Service and Gila County. So Gila County's already started building this veterans retreat. I've been there. It's wonderful. It's the only of its kind in northern Arizona. And so this is a land exchange between the Forest Service, which doesn't need the land anymore. And that's one thing I love about this bill, Lyle, as a fiscal conservative. This isn't costing the taxpayers anything, but it's important. As you know, so much of the land out west is controlled by the federal government. And this land exchange is just taking land from the Forest Service, giving it to the county so that they can continue to build and operate this amazing veterans facility. As a veteran myself, I understand how difficult it is sometimes when you're getting out of the service, not only to turn the page and find a new career, something that is fulfilling to you and provides for your family, but also a place where you can go and just get away from it all, have some peace and quiet, and enjoy some relaxation with your family. And so, we're excited about this one. We think that now having the Senate and the presidency, this will get signed into law this Congress. And we'll continue doing what we can to help, veterans, whether it's through the VA, nonprofits, or whether it's something like this to give them a place to go and recreate and retreat.
I'll give you a second here to think about any closing remarks you'd like to make while I share something, and then come back to you with your closing thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, Eli Crane, Congressman Eli Crane from Arizona, has been my guest. I'm very humbled. I met Eli a little over 3 years ago before he announced, and we talked about him running. Correct me anywhere along here, Congressman. And I enjoyed phone conversations with him prior to his first appearance on my show. And what I noticed in the phone conversations with nobody around is his straightforward manner, his unpretentiousness. He may be a little embarrassed by my saying all this, but he was very straightforward. He was not politically correct. And he was more concerned with making things better. Otherwise, why would he run? He didn't need the job. He didn't need the title. And that came through in our phone conversations. And I've noticed in the last 3 years that he's been a congressman, he has remained the same. He's virtually unpretentious. He's a servant leader, and he cares about putting his constituents, his state, his nation first above his career and his resume. And I want to say that he won't, but I will, because I've been very humbled to see him behind the curtain before he became publicly known and nationally. And now we have the joy of watching our congressman make a difference on the national level for all of America, not just for his district. So, Congressman, thank you for what you have shown people to be what it's like to be a servant leader. Any closing thoughts you might have?
Yeah, thanks, Lyle. I appreciate those kind words. The only closing thoughts that I'll have is this. I'm grateful to everybody who turned out and supported the president. We definitely have a pretty amazing opportunity here. It's not very often that you get the House, the Senate, and the presidency at the same time. But I also want to just encourage, everybody out there, anytime you come into a complete disaster zone, whether it's in the federal government or, running a small business, often it does take time to turn that thing around. And I just want to, ask the American people to remain patient with this administration. I think they're doing a great job. I think they're moving at lightning speed. And there's going to be mistakes that are made, and there's also going to be adversity along the way. But I do trust this president. He's one of the only people in this town I trust, because he's a man that does everything that he can to keep his word. And I just want to, relay that to the American people out there. I think there's some very good days coming for the United States of America and its citizens. And I just appreciate everybody, trusting the president and the process, because it does take some time. We've got a lot of cleanup to do. We've got a lot of, politicians that we have to deal with on a daily basis in Washington, D.C. And so thank you to everybody for supporting the president. Please continue to pray for him and, his staff. And I do think that there are some very good days right around the corner.
Thank you. Congressman Eli Crane's been my guest, and I really appreciate not only him taking the time out, but ladies and gentlemen, you taking the time out to tune in. I'm Lyle Rapacki, and that's how I see things from Arizona today.